have to stay in the race. So I would only request, think we have in this field. I would request all of you to keep asking questions, keep sharing your thoughts, so that we can have a more meaningful and productive discussion. Please keep typing in the chat box. That's my only request to everyone. That I am not able. Sam, is the screen visible?
Yes, it's visible one.
Yeah.
Visible, sir. It is visible.
Yeah.
It's visible. Okay. So the first case study I'm going to talk about is about Southern New Hampshire University. And this particular instance that I'm quoting, it's a published case study. So this particular instance that I'm quoting about has happened in 2015 when the president, Paul LeBlanc, was, going through the graduation ceremony. So even though they had a, let's say, huge auditorium which could seat around 12,000 people, they had to do 3 rounds of this, ceremony, because the number of people passing out was so huge. So going out of the script, Paul LeBlanc, just asked a couple of questions. First, he said, whoever has, done a military service out of the people sitting here, could you please stand up? So almost 50% of the people who were sitting there stood up. Then he said, out of the balance people who are sitting, people who have kids, can you please stand up? So almost the balance, 50%, almost everybody got up. So what he was trying to, show about in that was, out of the people who were graduating that day, almost 90 to 95% people were people who are already working, people who had a family, but people who, besides having a busy life, had found time and money to, maybe improve on their academic preparedness or improving on their skill sets. So let me just briefly tell you about the university. In 2016, they had revenues about around 535 million. They had been growing at around 34% compounded growth rate for the last 6 years. Had been elected as one of the best places to work. Was elected as the most innovative company for the last 2-3 years. So this is the situation in 2015-16. But let's say 10-12 years back, when LeBlanc had actually taken over this as the president of this institution, this was just a second-tier, relatively unknown institution, which was quite old. It was 70 years old even at that point of time, which had a huge and nice campus like most US universities have. But other than that, it was not something which, there was nothing that you could really talk about. So how did they grow in the span of 10-15 years? How was it that they could grow from a normal second-tier university to probably one of the top, online universities where, so much of people were graduating? So traditionally, what used to happen, like in any campus, the maximum number of people who join in for a graduate program are 18-year-olds. And what does an 18-year-old want? An 18-year-old wants to have a good campus, maybe, place where you could have fun, and maybe you learn also in between and, grow up during this time. So like that, they also have the same kind of people who are coming in. So whatever processes and parameters or, procedures they made were made to cater to this kind of an audience, which was mainly the 18-year-olds. They also had an online academic program which is running, which is known as a distance education. which was maybe 1% of the total size of the normal program. But once they join, they try to understand what are the kind of people who are enrolling for this program. And when they try to do that, what they found is the average age of people who are joining an online program was around 30 years. And the key objective was, how do I upgrade myself to a different level? But when they went through the procedures, the college followed the same procedure that it had for a normal 18-year-old who was joining to someone who was joining for an online program. But actually, if you look at the requirements or what we call as jobs to be done are very different for both these categories of people. So to put in a small example, now if somebody had called and asked about the courses in the college, what the college normally did was it would take down people's details and probably send them a brochure. But it never really discussed about financial aid or things like that, because for an 18-year-old, financial aid was not something very important. Probably his parents did. But for a person who was joining an online program because he wanted to develop himself, this was one of the key parameters that he was interested in. Not only that he was interested in, he also had the capability to take a decision on that immediately. So he probably would decide whether to join here or some other place. This would be one of the key parameters that would decide that. So based on this, they actually redesigned the whole, I would say, online program. And what happened is over a period of 10 years, it went from maybe hardly the 500, 600 people joining to a institution where 75,000 students were doing this online program, and with around 1,200 employees who are there as part of only this online program. So like I said, in between, one of the enablers, what enabled them to do this was, they tried to look at what is the job that each person was looking from the institution, what we call as jobs to be done. So I'll cover about that as we go forward. Or any questions so far, anything that you would like to share so that we can discuss on that. Anybody from the group? I know a few people since I've done a couple of programs. I know Uma from the MBA team. And so Uma, any thoughts? Or I can see Vetrivel also. Any thoughts from anybody before I go forward?
So good afternoon, sir. This is Sam.
Sam, I think there's something in the chat. I was trying to. Is there something in the chat? If there's nothing, then we can go forward. Sam, is there something in the chat?
No, sir. I just want to ask just a question, sir.
Yeah, please.
Like you were insisting about the jobs to be done, right, sir?
Right.
Whether it should be a short term or it should be a long term, how for we have to plan.
Okay, so I am actually covering about jobs to be done in the next slide. So probably that will answer your question, what you actually had in mind.
Yes. Okay, sir. Okay.
Okay, so maybe I'll go forward in case there are no other questions. So what I meant by jobs to be done is, if you take any person's life, including you and me, there will be some job which will come about. Which jobs? I don't mean the job that you go to an office and do, but to meet your requirement to live, there will be some job which will come up, which has to be addressed. To give you a small example, now, for example, the place where I stay, because of the lockdown, the society does not allow maids to come inside. But I need my flat to be kept clean. So what do I do if I have a lot of time? So my job to be done in this case is to keep my apartment clean. So what is the options I have? Maybe if I have a lot of time, maybe I can clean it on my own. Or if I have a problem on time, maybe I could, look at maybe buying a vacuum cleaner, or I could maybe buy a cleaning robot and things like that. So what I'm saying is, for each job that has to be done by anyone, there are different options that are available. And it is when those options suit the person's requirement that person buys it or starts using it. Another thing about jobs to be done is it really doesn't change over a period of time. For example, let me explain that with cameras. Now all of us have good cameras in our mobile phones, and we keep on taking snaps when we go about. So what is that we're actually trying? When we take a snap, we are trying to capture an experience that we are having and retain it with us so that we can share with people whom we care for or with friends and things like that. So today what we do, maybe we take a shot, and once we come back or on the spot, we send it on WhatsApp, we upload it in social media so that people are able to see. Let's say you go back 6 or 7 years back when your mobile camera phones weren't so good. Probably in those times, you would carry a digital camera with you, but you would still do the same thing. You would take snaps, whichever of whatever situations or places that you found interesting and wanted to retain in your memory. And what did you do once you came back? You would actually download all those messages into your laptop or into your system and then send it through mail or through whatever options you had to people, your friends or people who had traveled with you and things like that. So even in that situation, the job that was to be done was the same. You had to capture, the experiences that you had or the locations that you had gone to and share it with people. But let's go further back, maybe to the time when I was in college and all that, when you never had any digital cameras, your normal cameras, and which you didn't have cameras with you. So you probably, when you went for a trip, you actually borrowed a camera from someone who had. And what you did is, once you came back, you actually went to the the processing place and you got it processed, and you could see the pictures in a screen, and you could probably decide which of those you wanted to actually take print out. And you would make that small album, you would put it in a small album and give it to you, and you would go and show that to your friends who had traveled with you or your classmates. So what I'm trying to do is, even at that time, in the last 20 or 25 years, if you see, the job to be done has remained the same for this segment. You wanted to capture moments which are of interest to you. Today, if you see, there are a lot of technical options available in this. You have, filters available, you have color combinations available, which helps you modify and make your picture look better. But how many people actually do use these things? There are hardly maybe 15 or 20 or 25% people who use all these things. Otherwise, 75% or 80% people still continue to have the same job to be done what they had 20 or 25 years earlier. So what I wanted to reiterate by this example was, the job to be done it's not that it's suddenly going to change. And the next point what I wanted to highlight was, a particular product could actually satisfy two different kind of jobs to be done. Now I'll explain that with a very simple example. With something called something that we eat regularly in the South, particularly we all like masala dosha, so that is something we all have every now and then. So I remember this incident when I had started working. I was working in Bangalore, and I used to say to people familiar with Bangalore, I used to say in Indiranagar, and my office was in Lal Bagh. So I had to take a bus for around 30-35 minutes to reach my office. And since my office started around 9:15, I would leave every day at around 8 o'clock. Since I was staying alone, I had to have breakfast from outside. And I used to remember there was this restaurant exactly opposite the bus stop where I used to board the bus, which used to give us this small masala doshas. My job to be done at that point of time was, I needed to have something which would keep me filled up till afternoon, which would not make me hungry till the lunchtime. But I needed to have something which, I just had 5 or 10 minutes before the bus came. So I had to quickly have it. And it had to be within my budget because I just started working. So my budget was also under constraint. So it had to be within my budget. So this person had this stand-in place. He had a normal restaurant, but he had also made in this stand-in place where you could quickly come and you could order masala. They should come to you in 1 minute. You could stand there, quickly gobble it down and go and catch the bus. So not only me, there were a lot of professionals like me who were working in different companies. That place used to be filled up with people. Because this person was innovative to understand that the job to be done for a person who was rushing to office were these 3 or 4 things that I listed out. Now in the weekend, I would normally go home every alternate week or something like that. And when I did go home, I would go out with my family, with my parents and my sister and all that. And we would invariably go into some restaurant and we would again end up ordering masala dosha. But here the requirement was very different. So you would sit somewhere comfortably. You would order, the order would come to you after 10, 15 minutes. It would be a much bigger masala dosha. You would, the bearer would keep giving you chutney, which you would use to, have it. And the whole experience would probably last 30 or 35 minutes. So what I was trying to explain here is the product is the same. It's the same masala dosha that you're having in the morning rush and the evening. But because my job requirements very different in the morning time and in the evening time. And because the first restaurant was able to identify that and modify the product accordingly, that it became a bestseller. The next is, so what I was trying to reiterate with the earlier example was the jobs to be done requirement is very different for an 18-year-old who was joining a normal academic program and a person who's doing an online program. It is at that point of time when the university understood this and started to cater to meet the requirement of the online crowd that it started becoming popular. Any questions or any experiences anybody would like to share or anything like that? In fact, I still remember I tried doing a PhD some, I think, 5-6 years back, and I had got an admission into this very nice college. It was a part-time PhD, but the problem was the way the university treated a part-time person was still like a full-time person. So I had to go there every, I think, 2 months. I had to be there for 1 week, and getting leave was such a tough time for me. I would never get leave. So invariably, I would miss classes, and the faculty will say you don't have attendance, so you can't write the exams. But my job to be done was not to get a PhD degree for showing as doctor. My requirement was very different. Unfortunately, probably at that point of time, the university didn't understand that. Anybody else has any experiences or any questions or anything to share before I go forward?
Raju, at present, in our institution, due to COVID, all the online classes are in progress.
Okay.
Okay. For that online classes, the students are not that much of adapt to that environment. We are facing more problems. That is, in your point of view, how to make some strategy.
You mean students are not comfortable with online assessment? That's the question.
At present now.
Actually, I'm covering online assessment and all as we go forward. So probably I'll take that question at that point in time. I'll park this question, Valdi, and I'll answer that probably when I reach there. I have assessment and classrooms future, how it is going to evolve.
Okay.
If there's nothing else, I think I'll go forward. So I'll just quickly take you through some learning styles. You people will probably know more about this than me because you are already teaching to so many years. But I started thinking about this learning styles by accidentally a few weeks back because one of my friends was celebrating his birthday and his family had asked me to send a video, sharing some of the experiences we had together. And while I was trying to recollect those experiences, I suddenly started recollecting a lot of things which were not of importance. First time where I would have met him, where we had gone out together, and things like that, which was of no real importance. But it started coming back to my mind, which is where I started thinking out probably it is because the way I had probably looked at the experiences or the way that had been learned into my mind that it was recollecting and coming back to me. So I'll quickly take you through this. You guys will already know this, I'm sure, but just as a refresher, there's something called visual learning style, which is when so somebody who's in a visual learning style is when you understand things when it is actually shown to you, you see and you understand it better. Or rather, you also understand things better when you read and go through things. You understand things when things are actually shown in a flowchart diagram or is explained with visual effects, so you understand it better. Or if you're also somebody, if you are listening to a talk and then you have this habit of noting down things that you've understood in your diary, because you feel that it will you will retain it more. So if you have any of these characters, if you relate to any of these, you're probably someone who has a visual learning style. The next is the auditory learning style. So if you're someone who, let's say, you prefer listening to the news rather than reading the newspaper, or you're somebody who listens more rather than talking, or if you're somebody who understands or retains things more, if you are actually there's some discussion happening and you're actively participating in that. If there is some noise that is happening in the background, you get distracted. You're also someone who you probably talks a lot to yourself. Maybe you you have read something and you wanted to refresh it, so you talk to yourself about it. You see more of big ideas rather than small details, and you get terribly distracted by visual, too much of visual overload. So if you relate to any of these things, you're probably an auditory learner. You probably relate more to the audio sound of it. You're auditory learning, as it is called. The next is what is known as kinesthetic learning. There are many other styles also. I've taken 3 because these are the most prominent ones. This is when, let's say, you learn when you do things in groups, when you have some activity that has been happening, and then you pick up the information much more faster. You are very good at lab classes or doing things with your hands, or you, let's say, you remember more things that you've read than what you've heard. And even when you're sitting in a class, I don't know, some of you would have noticed, I have this habit. You tend to keep writing something, or you keep moving your feet. Something has to keep moving for you to keep the focus on. Or you're someone you would have seen some great players who keep chewing gum while they're playing. They say it keeps them focused. So you're somebody who who gets more concentration when you chew gum. Just as an example, it's not that you just have one kind of a learning style. You might alternate from one style to another as per the requirement, or you might use a mix of styles. But I think if we just give an example just from my personal life, I used to have a tough time in school learning languages. I had a tough time learning Hindi and Malayalam in those days. And my teachers and my mom used to have a tough time making me learn these languages. But today I speak, at least probably it was the way those languages. It's not that I didn't have I had a difficulty in learning languages. It is probably the way the languages taught to me at that point of time was probably not suiting my learning style, which is why I had difficulty learning. So today, if I'm able to talk so many languages, it's not that I have a problem with languages, but I'm able to learn it the way it suits my requirement. There is also something called types of intelligence. I just covering this because these things become very relevant when we move forward in the futuristic classrooms and all that. These are all becoming very important. So you have some people who are very good at linguistics. Some people are who have logical and mathematical intelligence. People who can solve very complex equations or derive complex equations. Some people are we call as spatial in the sense people who can visualize things in 3-dimensional mode. And understand things like that. For bodily, kinesthetic, musical are people probably who will learn if they dance or something like that, or they're listening to music in the background. People who have excellent interpersonal intelligence, somebody like a Mother Teresa, who is not really a very what do you call this thing, but he has that strong interpersonal relationships, interpersonal skills. Actually, just I'm covering the 7 or 8. So this is there in the back of the mind, So this is if I club both of these, the learning styles and the intelligence. This is why you find some people doing extraordinarily well in some subjects, some people doing extraordinarily well in a particular class, some people doing, being brilliant in a particular kind of situation. So, well, I'll come to that. So, any questions or anything anybody would like to add about anything before I go forward?
Good evening, sir. I posted a question in the chat box, sir.
Yeah, I'm not able to hear you.
I posted a question in the chat box, sir. I just wanted to know how do you identify the students' learning style within a short time? Because we have other time.
Sam, I think you'll have to help me. I'm not able to get it.
Sorry.
I think she's put it here. How do we identify the students' learning style? Yeah. So, yeah, I got that's a question, right? Okay, I'll take that question. So, see, like I said, I gave you some examples. So, if you find a student who is who's brilliant in in team jobs. You will have these class activities, and if someone who's brilliant there, but who sleeps out during the lecture, it means he's probably kinesthetic learner, or someone who, when you show charts and all things like that, who will immediately pick up things. It shows that he's a visual kind of learner. So that is there. There are more learning styles which are there, but these are the predominant learning styles. So there are a lot more things to cover, but I didn't want to take it. So does that answer your question, Yamini, or do you want me to explain it further?
Thank you, sir. It's fine. But my question was within a short span of time, because we are running out of time. Our lecture hour is, let's consider, only 40 minutes to 50 minutes. Within the short span of time, how can we?
I mean, that is what I'll be covering. See, what you're talking about is the way we are imparting education today. Okay. But that is going to change in probably the next 3-4 years. So I'll be coming to that, how that is going to change. And that is why I've covered about this learning skill and intelligence. Because we are going into a lot of personalization, which I will cover. And
Thank you, sir.
See, just to take you through, evolution of classrooms. I know if you probably go back 200-250 years, at that time you had something like a Gurukul and all that, where there were 20 or 30 people with one guru, and they lived and stayed with that person. So the guru knew exactly what kind of a person was he, what are his skill sets, what, like you were saying now, how do you identify somebody in today's world? When it started out, it was a very personalized kind of education, where the teacher knew exactly what kind of requirements the student had, what was his strength, what was the learning style, what is intelligence. So he could probably give a personalized kind of education to that person, since the number of people were limited. In fact, I was watching a movie the other day about ninjas, and it was the same pattern even there, where you had 20 to 30 people who joined this program as very infants, and then they lived and ate and did everything with that master. And the master knew exactly what was each student's weaknesses, strengths, what could he use him and what kind of situation, things like that. So this is how the education system started out. But then what happened, let's say 100 or 125 years back, with this, what happened is the number of people who could get educated was very limited. You had probably 10% or 15% people who could actually get educated. So at some point of time, as the economy started growing, as we started going to industrialization, there was requirement for more manpower. So the government thought, now how do I increase this this educated base? So they started, modifying the way things are taught. How can you communicate things to a wider audience? So that is how we have evolved, from very individualistic and very personalized kind of teaching to the kind of teaching that we have today, where, like Yamini said, you get 40 minutes or 1 hour of class, you have to talk to 80 or 90 people, and you have to cover your topics within a specific time frame. So you really do not get to give any kind of personalized attention. You have probably decided this is the medium which works for 50 or 80% of the people, and you will follow that. So this is what we have been following the last 100 years, and we have got used to this. Similarly, now we have assessment. After each, if you have to pass, you have an assessment. At the end of a semester, you have an assessment. So how are we doing these assessments today? I'll explain that with a different example, which is actually quoted by Stephen Spear. Stephen Spear is a renowned professor from MIT. And he actually visited a assembly lines, one of the American car companies and one of Toyota, because Toyota at that time was, considered as, the best production line systems they had, where everything happened just in time and there was hardly any wastage. So he wanted to really understand how was both the companies were following the same production line system. How is it that Toyota could go into a zero error kind of system while the American companies were struggling to do that? So in both these places, the professor's task was to fix up the front seats of the car in the assembly line. So in the American company, the process that they were following is somebody would explain the full concept of how the seat had to be fixed, how the seat had to be put, which screws has to be put first, and which had to be put after that. what are the next 2-3 procedures. Already maybe he would do it once or twice there, and then he was directly put onto the assembly line. So what Stephen Spear says is, for the first 20 or 30 times, he could never do it correctly. He would probably put it, he would place the seat correctly, but then he would forget which screw to put in. It would keep on leading to errors. At the same time, when he went to Toyota, Toyota had a very different kind of teaching style. They had this, learning booth which was created. The learning booth would have what they call an artificial or a created assembly line which was there. And on the assembly line, if the first step of the process was to put the front seat, he had to become perfect in that before he went to the next step. The next step would be probably to put in the front screws. But he could only go there if the seat was put in the perfect way. So the difference was, I'm coming back to assessment. In the first case, the assessment was happening at the end. To find out whether he had actually put the seat correctly, they would have an inspection team at the end of the line who would actually sit there and check all these things which had been installed to find whether it is done properly or not, which is probably the way we do assessment today. Probably we have some small tests in between, but your main assessment is done at the end of the semester or at the end of the year. While in the case of Toyota, it is for each step. If you have to go to the next step, you have to complete that assessment and go forward. So which is what is going to be the future. So I'll come to that when I go forward. So in today, what we are trying to assess is, we're trying to assess whether somebody has mastered a particular material, is he ready to progress to a different level. Then you want to probably rank and compare people. So you have devised this mechanism where you can rank these people accordingly. And then you also want to assess out of the total information that you had passed to them, what kind of percentage of information have they really understood. So this is what we are trying to assess today. So now let me get into how the future classrooms are going to be. And future is not very far away. Probably in the next 4 or 5 years, this is what is going to happen. And it's not that these things are not already there. See, for example, this virtual chemical lab, which is called Virtual Chem Lab, you can Google it. It has been around for the last 12 years. What this person has done 1,200 experiments virtually. He has taken pictures of actual live experiments and coded that into the system, where you could actually do all the many experiments that we do virtually. Similarly, now as per the new education policy which has come in, students have an option to select whatever things. So somebody wants to learn a particular language, firstly there might be only one person. So obviously you cannot have one professor for that. But that person will have an option where he could probably log into a online classroom what was there and learn that, and there would be an assessment for that in a particular way which is agreed by everybody. So what I'm trying to highlight here is, when classrooms started, we had a very personalized kind of teaching which used to happen. Then we went into a mass kind of teaching, like an assembly line, where there were a lot of people sitting and we were trying to impart knowledge to a lot of people in one go. There was no personalization. As we go forward, the number of people we are going to shift more and more into personalized teaching. And it is not that the teacher is going to go to them and do it. The tools that are getting developed or tools that are already there will facilitate the staff to do that, or facilitate the teachers to do that. What it also enable is, today, let us say I want to take a class at Coimbatore. I can only take for the 80 or 90 students who are there in that facility at that point of time. But tomorrow, if it's an online thing or if it's on a platform, the people who can access are in hundreds and thousands. So you will start addressing a huge number of students at the same time. What this will also lead to is hugely improved productivity. See, I just remember when we started working out, we didn't have the sales tools and sales calls and all that. We were actually out of office. If I was doing a sales call for the next 3 days, I would not even know what is happening in the office, or I was not even connected to the office. Once in a while, probably once in 2 days, I would call my boss just to talk to him. But other than that, I was totally out of it. But today, wherever I'm traveling, I have my mobile. I will access mails, I will keep acting on them, I will reply on them, which has led to a huge, productivity improvement. While, the logistics team and the stores team and all, and the finance team, we would have so many number of people because the finance team had to make ledger after ledger, the store person had to make ledger after ledger, which were manually written. So I remember even I started in Cochin, even a small branch, we used to have 5 or 6 or 7 finance guys and logistics guys. Today, if you go there, you will probably have an outsourced employee who's managing the whole thing, because the technology is developed in such a way such that you can centrally monitor all these things and do all these things. And what this has led to is it has led to much better pay. So this is, I think, something which everybody can be happy about. The way if things evolve, the way I'm saying it will also lead to teachers and professors getting much higher pay, because they're going to address to much wider audience and the productivity is going to increase dramatically. Just a minute, I think the system had hang for a minute. So coming back to now assessment, I think there was a question on assessment also which came in. I think Maladi had asked a question. Now assessment going forward is, why is assessment very difficult for students? Because what has happened is somebody who's 18 or 20 years old, they have been used to a particular kind of learning at a particular time of assessment. Now the assessment going forward is going to be like the Toyota factory. If you finish, let's say 5 pages, or you finish a small topic, you will have to, if you actually go to most of the online courses, even today that is the way it has been structured. There will be a small quiz at the end of each module or even each topic, and you have to compulsorily complete that and get maybe 70% or 80% or 60%, whatever is shown there, to move forward. So how do we enable people who are today struggling with assessment to get to that level? Probably, I think, instead of following, what mistake we normally make is we try to adapt the earlier things that we're doing to the new situation. So let us say we used to have a test paper at the end of a chapter. We are probably doing the assessment in the same way. So probably we will have to, maybe at the end of the day, next day morning, have a small assessment for 5 minutes. So we will have to adapt this assessment thing to meet this kind of future thing, so that people also will, students also will, start adapting to it and learning with it. Dr. Maladi, I hope I was able to answer your question. This was particularly related to your question on how can you take students from the existing level to the next level. So my thought is like, probably if you could structure these assessments in for smaller lots and for smaller topics instead of the normal thing that we used to do earlier, probably that might help. That's my thought. Okay, any questions, anything anybody would like to share?
Sam, can you see the chat box? Some questions are there?
Yes, sir. There is a question in chat box, sir. Online classes change the teaching methods. Do you think online classes effective, like normal teaching method in students' perspective?
Online classes change the teaching method. See, Dr. Kuma, I'll take your question. What I feel is, like I said earlier, we are just comparing online teaching to what was earlier. But what we see today is not going to the end of it. Till now, we were not able to do online classes because there were a lot of things that were disabling it. But let's say in 1 or 2 years' time, these things will start evolving. It will evolve to a very where a student will be able to personalize the kind of teaching that he wants to do. The teacher might be taking class in one shot, but the student will have his own methods. For example, if you go to Byju's is a online learning app that is there. It provides a student different options for learning. So if the student is a cricket fan, a lot of concepts they explain using cricketing terms, which makes the student really understand it better because he relates to what is being taught. So Dr. Umar, just to answer your question, maybe presently it might not be meeting the actual requirements as a normal class, but I think it's only a matter of 1 or 2 years before this will really evolve and go forward. Shall I move forward? Any other questions? Or anything to share?
Ma'am, your voice is not audible, ma'am.
Yeah, I think you'll have to type because voice is echoing. You're not able to make out. Please feel free to ask because that makes the whole experience, or share in case you are all in this field, so you'll probably have more experiences than me. Yamini, are you asking a question? Or?
Yes, sir. Practically speaking,
Yeah.
when we do this online classes, no, our preparation time is getting more.
Okay.
It's like it's prolonging, and whereas the teaching time, whereas we'll meet the students all this time, that is getting reduced. So can this be not be a
See, madam,
classes?
see, that is you are feeling so because you are comparing what was there to what is there presently. But that present is not going to stay the way it is. It will drastically evolve in the next maybe 6 or 8 months, which I'm covering as we go forward. What is that kind of change? So, like I said earlier, the options that these today you're just doing it on Zoom. Tomorrow you might have, let's say you go to a Coursera. I was saying Byju's, for example, or you go to Coursera. Each course is adapted to that person. If the person wants a certificate, the course matter remains the same, but the kind of tests he has and the kind of quizzes he has to take are very different than somebody who's just doing the course for knowledge. So that person has a very lenient kind of, you can quickly scan through and read and go through. So like I said earlier, we are feeling that online is probably not effective, which is the truth. It's not effective maybe as such as normal classes today. But as things evolve, I think they will lead to more personalization for the concerned students.
Won't be this particular assessment. The assessment cannot be. Can't be a multiple choice question.
Yeah, it can be. In fact, it would be much better. That's why I said earlier, instead of doing it at the end of one module where you have a written test for maybe 10-15 questions, probably at the end of every day or the next day morning, if you could have a multiple choice questions, the students will be able to adapt to it much more easier. They will be able to adapt to it much more quicker. So we are all going through that adaptation stage. We are, for example, as a teacher, we are not used to taking classes this way.
Exactly.
We're used to seeing people's faces. And what happens? I also have this problem. I'm not used to talking virtually till last 5-6 months back. But so you see the person's face, you can make out the person's understanding or not. But I think you will evolve it over time. For example, till 6 months back, till March, I couldn't even imagine, going and doing a review of the team online. I had to go physically sit with them, have the presentation in the conference room and do the review. But today, every month I'm doing the review, and over a period of 5-6 months, I'm fine. It is working just like the normal way. So I think as we keep doing it, we also find ways to understand these things, and it keeps evolving.
Fine.
Sir, from my side, sir.
What is that?
Sir, myself, Sam, sir.
Yeah, please, sir. Please ask.
Sir, the education is not about teaching the syllabus and other things. In the past days, the education system will give us the discipline, some thought about the culture and other things. But due to this online, these parameters are missing, I think. So.
I didn't get your question, Sammy. Are you talking about is it difficult to?
No, sir. Actually, not only syllabus, the teaching methodology is not only the syllabus.
Okay.
Apart from that, the discipline, the culture, the unity, and other parameters has also been.
Honestly, if you ask me, these are all mental blocks in our mind. For example, in the office, we used to think that you had to be at 9:15 to look as a person who could do things correctly. You had to be, for example, I would always reach before 9:30 because that is the way you have been programmed. Your mind has been programmed that way. But today, everything that we used to do from office, we are doing from work from home. We had problems initially on a lot of things, but we have found workarounds for 90% of them. So I think discipline, I know it is difficult for an 18-year-old or 20-year-old, and monitoring them is a different ballgame. But I think they will also understand and evolve. For example, you go to the US universities where things are not so strict as that they're here. People go and take whatever classes they like. So probably after the new NEP comes in, that option will come here also, where students will probably take courses which they want, which they like, not what is 100% given by the university. There might be 80% or 70% which is given by the university. So students also will get used. That's the way how I look at it. Vetrivel sir has also some question. Monitoring students is becoming. Yeah, I fully agree with you, sir. How to improve is see what I'm saying is a lot of these things will evolve. Like I'm covering platforms. Today we are only using Zoom to communicate. That is not a medium. It is devised for that kind of monitoring. Maybe you have, I think, Google Classrooms, which is more evolved. But over a period of time, you have a lot of these platforms which will come in. So I'll cover that as we go there, Mr. Victor. I have that in one of my slides on how this thing will evolve as Should I go forward? Any other questions or any other thoughts or any other experiences? I'm happy a lot of people are sharing a lot of things because then the whole learning becomes better. Okay, I'll cover a little bit of value networks. By value networks, what you mean is whenever something is running, there is, for example, now if you're taking, there's an institution which is running, that institution doesn't run on its own. There are a lot of other things which enable the institution to run. Just to take an example from an industry. For example, when Sony came out with this transistors and transistor radios first time came about, existing let's say value chain or the supply chain people would never take it because they said these are very small things and this will not fail, because the existing shops who were selling the radios at that point of time, vacuum radios, they used to have a lot of problems and they used to really make the money by servicing those things. Sony really had to go and find out a different chain. In fact, that is how all these modern trade people whom we know today came into this business, because the normal existing shop owners just would not send. So just like that, now today, if you take the existing network of an institution, existing value network of an institution, you have textbooks which are used. Now textbooks are written by some people whom are probably we consider as experts in that field. They're very good at it, but they write the books, then somebody distributes the books, somebody publishes the books. So there is a network for publishing those books, ensuring that those books are accepted by the concerned board or the university as prescribed textbooks, and in turn that comes to all the colleges. Then there is a way in which that is that content is delivered to the student and how it is tested, and how the teachers are also trained on a lot of things. So what I'm trying to say, all these things, these textbooks, their writing, their distribution, getting it approved by local boards, the testing methods, the teacher training, these are all value networks which support the institution. And there is an established value network which has been running for so many years, which is why the institutions run the way they are. Now, what will happen is going forward, these value networks will start changing. Like I said, the example of what happened when a Sony transistor came in. Now, suddenly you are getting into a new medium where things are very different. All this entire value network is going to change. So, next thing what I'm going to talk about is about competition. And why I said competition is, so far, if you take the last 100 years or 50 years, a particular institution would compete with another institution. But for example, like I said about cameras, or if you, I'm sure some of you remember, at least around 15 years back, Kodak was the most popular, making films, biggest company making films. And there was a company which came out with digital cameras. But they felt that, digital cameras is not the future technology, and so they didn't really focus on it. With the result, what happened is today they're nowhere to be seen. Similarly, let's say you take Nokia phones. I'm sure all of you remember Nokia phones. They were the number one player in the touch button, normal kind of feature phones. They were the number one player. But they never adapted to a, let's say, a touch screen kind of model. And today they're nowhere to be seen. So similarly, since this whole thing is evolving, the competition that institutions are going to face is not going to be from other institutions anymore. So I just listed on, some people are already visible on the screen. Like you have Coursera. What has Coursera done in this lockdown time? They've gone about and offered around 30,000 courses free, and every engineering colleges who applies are given around, let's say, 1,000 logins free. So what is it they're trying to do? They are trying to popularize their platform in all these college students. Some of these universities have also recommended you can do these, courses from Coursera. So what happens? That becomes a kind of aggregated model. I also understand that, government is also working on making all these online courses become officially accredited. So today, maybe one of the things which held back people was a lot of these courses were not officially accredited. So people used to hold back. But if that comes through, all the courses that are there and being run and being certified will get officially accredited. After Coursera, edX is the same. If you go to Udemy, one difference between Udemy and Coursera is, if you go to Coursera, you will find that most of the courses are offered by universities and university professors. You go to Udemy, any individual can come and start a course. So if I want to start a course on anything, innovation, for example, or anything, any small thing, I can go and start a course on Udemy and price it there. So if even a student wants to, let's say, talk about 7th standard bands, or an engineering student wants to talk about electronic devices, he can start a course in Udemy. You have the same facilities in a different way in YouTube. And like I said, in Byju's is trying to give each student a customized kind of experience, where that learning experience is going to be very personalized and customized. So what I was trying to say is, and just to answer why these online classes are not effective and all that, what this is going to lead to, it is going to lead to something known as platforms on which courses are going to be carried. So I'll talk a little bit about platforms. Platforms are, like, for example, if you take malls is a kind of platform where you have consumers who are being brought in touch with the people who actually buy, people who actually sell. Similarly, you have newspapers, bring in advertisements in touch with consumers. So these are the original platforms that we're all familiar with. But what has happened the last, let's say, 5-10 years is, because of the way in which IT has scaled up and technological improvements, it has become so easy to make these platforms without owning physical assets. So if you had a mall, that was a physical asset. The mall was a physical asset. Now today, if you go, for example, you go to Airbnb. Airbnb is today the world's largest hotel chain, but it does not have even one hotel on its own name. Or you take Uber. Uber is probably the largest transportation company in the world today, but it does not even have one car on its roads. So similarly, these platforms are going to come into education, and the kind of education that we're seeing today is going to evolve into these platforms. And once these platforms come in, it's only a matter of 1 year or 2 years before these platforms actually come in. You will have, like I said, non-professionals coming in talking about a lot of things that they have learned through experience, taking courses on that. You might have even students coming in, creating courses for other students. And one big advantage if the student does it is, maybe I understood something. But it is when I come and explain that to another person, my learning reinforces. I'm sure as professors you will vouch for this. Small concepts which, over a period of time you become very thorough because you've explained it to people. I've just seen Yamini's questions. Well, it has nothing to do with marketing. Yamini's question was Nokia also manufacture feature phones but is not made that popular. No, I think you've got it wrong, madam. And if you go back to, let's say, 2004, 2005, which is 15 years back, Nokia had around 60-70% of the market. But Apple came out with its first phone, I think, in 2010 or 2009, something of that sort, which had the phone that we are used to today, the touch phone. It is not that Nokia could not have done it. Nokia, if you even today, if you go and see, most of the patents are still held by Nokia. So they already had all these things with them. But they never thought that these things are going to come in. This competition is going to come. So they would have thought, it's a 1 lakh phone and I'm selling a 10,000 phone. How is it going to compete with me? But what happens is it's a cycle. Once it becomes more and more popular, the price keeps coming down. So similarly, I'm saying you have competition from not only all these people, but a lot of other people. I think it's there, the next slide, is because anybody can get into all these things. And now I was talking about personalization a lot. What these platforms will offer is the kind of personalization. Now, if I know that I am a visual learner, then I will be able to select that, and these platforms will start customizing that course to you. For example, do I want to take a small Uber or bigger Uber? Do I want to retain it for 4-5 times? And if I'm a frequent user, they give me options. What do you want to take this ride, or do you want me to give you an offer for 1 month where you get a discount for 20% for each? These things start popping out. These are personalized things for me. Similarly, once these platforms come into education, they're going to start offering a lot of personalized things. So like I said in the beginning, we will shift from this mass kind of teaching to very personalized kind of teaching. Not that the way content is delivered is not going to change, but the way content is being received by the recipient will change, because these platforms will have all these facilities built in. Or just cartoons or animated movies. Till technology came about, there was nobody who could actually compete with Disney. Disney was the best in animation because they had that kind of expert artist who could actually draw and do it. But once technology came in, today Pixar is part of Disney today, but Pixar at one point of time was, at a much higher level than Pictures changed. This has changed because in a normal style, in a normal time, getting these kind of things, then you would have to get the universities to accept. There were so many bodies you had to accept. You had to get teacher bodies to accept, parents to accept, students. So it would have taken a huge lot of time. But what has happened because of COVID is, because of we are forced to do these things, people have adapted to using technology. People have adapted to learning through mediums like Teams and Zoom and things like that. So the technology wave suddenly started out. Universities have accepted that you could do assessment online. You could do exams online. This acceptance, it has speeded up the acceptance and the speed at which these things are going to get implemented. That is what has happened. And it has also enabled governments to really enforce and things like that. These are the things of the future. So any questions before I quickly summarize? Any questions, any thoughts, anything to share? Or maybe I'll quickly summarize and then we can take a few questions. So what I really covered was, I covered a bit of jobs to be done. How jobs to be done is crucial because the requirements are going to be very different. Today, what is happening is we are catering to one set of people and one set of students. So the jobs to be done are same. But tomorrow, as this evolves, the requirements are going to be very different for each different set, because you will also start addressing which is going to come to Coimbatore to institution. You will start addressing a much bigger audience. So the job requirements will, or the requirements that they have, the expectations they have from you will be very different, and it will be very varied. So you will have to understand and cater your products accordingly. Then we touch base on a little bit of how future classrooms and assessments are going to come about, how platforms will come about and bring in that huge amount of personalization. Like I said, we started out with personalized teaching, we went into a mass scale of teaching, and this technology that the platforms will bring back that personalization into teaching. And I just want to leave with the last thing, which I said in between. Competition is not going to be, till now the competition was between one education institution and other education institution. From how do you get an autonomous label? How do you compete with another autonomous thing? Tomorrow we do not know. There is this lot of talk about Google starting courses. If Google is going to start courses, it will start competing with every other university. So your competition need not be any longer from any university. It can be from any technology company who decides to get into education or learning. That's my last statement. Any more questions, any thoughts to share? I'm happy to